I just want to acknowledge that, it really means a lot, David and I, as we were like ideating and thinking about, okay, like we don't know where or how, but we just feel like, it would be really helpful if we were on the other side to just have a safe space to have these conversations and have these tools and learn. And so we hope that these past few sessions, whether it was the first session or the second session or the third session that you're attending for the first time, that you feel that you will find new insights, perspective, but also most importantly, the encouragement to know that if you had asked these questions, you are not alone and you are certainly not the only person who is navigating these. David, anything that's coming up for you as you think about our third session and the final one for the spring?
Our third session, I'm kind of, looking forward to this one because I think this kind of will put a cap on everything that we've been discussing when we talk about, building that culture of the safe space, as you call it, to have conversations about data within an organization. I think today we'll talk about some like real life examples and some of the things that you've got to do going forward to make some of this happen. So this will be a good kind of final session. And even though it's the last one of these sessions, it's just really the first thing you're all doing going forward, I guess.
And so continuing on that, just a reminder, everything shared here stays here. While we do record, of course, the breakout sessions are confidential. And of course, if there's any aspects that you feel looking back, hey, can you edit that part out? Please, feel comfortable to do so. And we're grateful for all of you to making the time for yourself to pause and actually ask these questions, because I understand in the midst of all of this, as you were just joking this start, that we lose track of time of which date and time it is. And so just treating yourself that this is a time and space that you're making to process, to think, and ask these new questions. And so again, I'll remind ourselves again as our reminder to what our intention is, hopefully to leave you with more questions and answers, hopefully with new toolkits and new perspective, most importantly, the encouragement to know that you're not alone. And also the reminder of some tangible steps that you can indeed do immediately right after each session. And so being able to hold accountable. I'm curious, especially for those who were here last session, any updates that you would love to share and what you got a chance to do and any new questions that you were able to navigate. I'm curious, Brad, if you can give us a start, any updates since last month and any questions or things that you got to try last month.
Unfortunately, I missed the last session and haven't had the opportunity to go back and watch it yet. But we've been very active in working on our data governance program and working on some new SOP documents and learning the value of that really quickly, actually. But no, we've had some really good conversations and just related to how do we try to minimize or govern our data so we minimize duplications and artifacts, and it's quite interesting how it's come together, and I think it's just made us a better organization overall. So we look forward to keeping it going.
Love that. Love that. Thank you, Brad. Communication is everything. And indeed, I think you'll find it helpful even in the last one that you mentioned. We'll make sure you have access to the link. But as you've shared, even just having a clear standard operation procedure makes a huge difference. And whatever that means for each organization, because we use all these jargons and terminologies of what we mean internally in each system. But we don't realize even just across the hallway, they use that in a very different way. So thank you for sharing that and where you're at. Jamie, what about for you? I'm curious where you're at and any questions that came to surface since our last session.
Sure. I mean, I think the big takeaway I got from last session, the big thing that kind of struck me was the idea that like I've been working on this for a very long time, but everybody else has not, and it's new. And so trying to kind of meet them where they are and also kind of bring them forward. So, our particular project where we are right now is we are at the timing of when we could roll out is coinciding with the possibility for an upgrade, which sort of delays that. So what we've decided to do is just to go ahead and do the upgrade, pause, and push the rollout a little bit to do that, because we don't want to sort of roll it out and then say like, oh, hey, actually, it's unavailable for a bit, or the training we just did now looks different. So that's what we've sort of decided to do. But what that means is that it gives us more time to really prepare. And so we're starting to share a lot more updates about that process and how far out we think we are, and it's coming, and things like that, so that by the time we actually get there, people are familiar with the idea that it's happening, and they've been brought along for just a little part of this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing that as an example. And I love your reminder that, hey, because it was not in the original timeline, and we got more time to communicate. Like
Right.
it was a yes and opportunity. And I want to continue to encourage, as we think about whether it's the takeaway, whether it's the immediate things, the aha moments, the action items that you keep in mind, it's not going to happen the way we thought. So how do we make that a yes and? Things take longer. Okay, I have now more time to communicate and remind them. Things require more reminders. Okay, building on that, how do I optimize it to make it easier? David, anything else that's probably coming to mind? Because I know you're seeing a smile as you're thinking about it.
Well, that was, that whole thing, everything that Jamie just said resonated with me in terms of, you know, you use the phrase meeting them where they're at, but, the way I also looked at that, we've got an upgrade. So do we want to, how much do we want to throw at people at one time to handle? And it's a matter of choosing. So unless that upgrade is not very important and it gets pushed out, then it's better to delay and wait. And then use that opportunity to communicate. Don't just say, I'll reach back out to you in August. Use that time effectively to tell them about all the things so that when it does arrive, they'll be so excited. They'll be waiting for it, like a new Star Wars movie, which hopefully would be good. Maybe not, but you never know.
But we start with hoping, and that's exactly how our end user feel. They would start with hoping because they're coming from, whether it's going back to the Star Wars reference of just feeling like maybe I feel burned from the last movie that I didn't like versus the movie that I like. So they're just stemming from their past experience, whatever that version of the last movie or tech adoption that they might have had. So with that being said, let me dive into our slide. Again, if this is your first time, just a heads up is that we do call it workshop for a reason. It is going to be a working time. We hope that this is going to be a time you actually think about your own manuals, your processes, your toolkit, your references, and of course you can choose to share how much you're comfortable sharing here, and we'll have some breakout sessions so we can have a little bit more intimate conversation. So with that being said, yes, thank you, Jeff. I'm glad you are here. Welcome. First time's always the beauty. We are glad you are all here. Let me take a moment to invite you all to the Jamboard, which is our digital whiteboard. High recommendation and reminder, please use Chrome browser because I heard that is best for user experience. And if you can take a moment to join. And the top part is how I usually go back and forth to each slide, so you can follow me through there. And with that, I have the first question prompt to all of you to get your honest thoughts. So if this is your first time using Jamboard, you basically click here for the sticky notes, and then I'll leave my comments, which in this case, the question is, what kind of culture do you want to build? And why is that important for you and your company? I'll share one example. I think it's feeling safe to be myself, be silly, and be serious, all at the same time. Because that would mean I could bring up my ideas. David's not going to judge me if I be goofy. David's not going to take it too seriously if I bring up a different serious point. It's because Monica's just being Monica. And he can totally sense when I'm not being myself because I probably will not be doing any of that stuff too. So with that being said, we'd love for all of you, if you can take a moment to, again, join on the Jamboard, click here to the next slide if you are able to share your thoughts. And I'll give you all a little bit of time to reflect, share your comments in the Jamboard, and we will circle back. And of course, if anyone by chance have challenged you, please feel free to put it in the chat box and we will copy that note indeed. So I'll give you a few seconds to reflect. If you are here, we'd love to hear from you. Great to have you back. Curious to hear your thoughts. If you're able to share an audio, what's coming up for you as you look at this?
Hello, can you hear me, Monica?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Great. Hi, everyone. So looking at this list, one of the comments that's really resonating with me, or that is really calling to me right now, is the one that says, I want to lead with compassion. I want to create diverse, equitable, and inclusive spaces so I can meet others at their humanity. That's when the best ideas come about. And I totally agree with that, because I think so much of the way we react or respond to people is a very emotional experience. And in the workplace, that that can tend to supersede a lot of other interactions that are being driven towards like technical conversations or strategic conversations. How people are feeling or how they feel positioned to share and contribute becomes a really important factor. So I really like that someone shared that, and I think it's a great perspective to have.
Thank you, Hala, for reminding us of that and sharing how you feel about that comment. I want to highlight that particular piece as a reminder again, as we think about the past 2 sessions, of how that definition is going to feel very differently for every colleague, every department, every way that we're used to thinking. And this is where the curiosity and empathy and courage brings in. Some of the conversations I sometimes have with a lot of leaders is like, Monica, actually, sometimes if I can do a little complaint, is that being a good leader is so hard. Being a good tech adoption ambassador is so hard. You have to keep track of all these different voices and thinking about like, how am I empathizing, but also hence creating the culture that's truly honoring all of this. So curious, Jeff, thank you for your comment also on ethics. Is there anything else that you want to build on?
Well, we're in a high growth mode. This is the 5th or 6th startup that I've contributed to, and we are partnering with Dave. Basically, anything Dave does, I'm real interested in, because we've started a nice little relationship with Dave and his companies as well. So I want to stay in alignment with that. But I often see in these high growth companies the capability of kind of getting off on your core competencies has got you where you are in your growth. And we're going to be hiring a bunch of new engineers and sales folks. And I want to really make sure that we all stay within what got us to the growth curve that we're on right now. A lot of shiny objects in our space, a lot of areas that we could grow the product, but I think that may dilute or minimize the really the turnaround and the touch that we have today with not only our partners like Dave and his team, but our clients, so that all 3 of those interactions are consistent.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing that. And I appreciate your reminders on the feeling of how we feel about the shiny objects, because this is where I feel today's conversation on culture is going to be even more invaluable, to remind that even when we do feel that there are shiny objects scattered, that we should be sometimes looking around, because we want to grow. We are looking at new ways to grow, but we know where it's rooted in. And so, as you said, core competence. I also would say core competence of the culture. Who are we truly as a team? Why are we even here in the first place? Because the capability and capacity might grow, but as Jeff, you reminded us, and how about you pointed out, how is this equitably built upon in the culture? David.
Yeah, no, I wanted to just kind of echo something that Jeff just said, and we're talking about technology adoption and building that culture where people can have those good conversations and talk about things. One of the, I don't want to say it's a downside to talking, but it's something to be mindful of, is that as you get more conversations between different people that are looking at things that they might not have had the access to look at before, it is possible to start chasing shiny things. And so part of the culture is also just saying we don't necessarily want to talk about absolutely everything, but out of all the things we could be talking about, where do we all best spend our time? There could be a lot of shiny objects that each might do a little thing, but here's the one big thing we could talk about. And that's also, I think something to think about as you create a culture, which implicitly means you're broadening it to a wide audience of people. So that's just the one thing I wanted to comment on there.
And so building on that, I hope that today's time, we're going to flesh that out a little bit more, because all of us, we're already here because all of you already have some toolkits. So we're not starting with 101. So any element that we continue to introduce, I want you to see that as, how does this relate to what I'm already doing? And what else am I feeling curious to do more or less? So that's kind of the focal lens I want us to sit as we look. And in fact, I want to dig a little bit deeper. So tell me a little bit more. Again, if you can share in the Jamboard, breaking it down even more kind of specifically. What do you actually want? What do you not want? So again, we kind of shared about high level wise, but give me some specific details. And I'll give you again for a little bit of time to reflect. But again, if you are joining, I'll share the link here. And again, if anyone has trouble, you can just share in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you specifically want? And the more specific, the better. Yes, defensiveness, we do not want. We absolutely hear you on that. So as we continue to see these dots, thank you very much. I want to check in with Ashish. Curious to hear what's standing out for you and what is resonating with you as you look at these notes.
A lot of things are kind of echoing what I wrote, and it's along the lines of communication and ownership and accountability. I think those kind of get lost when we're trying to implement something new or trying to push for adoption. But at the same time, things that shouldn't be happening is, as one person wrote, defensiveness. I used to do it this way, or more like territorial nature. That shouldn't be the thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The language matters. Jamie, what about for you? What's standing out for you?
I thought it was just interesting. A lot of these sort of seem to be along the same lines as each other. Empowerment, ownership, right focus. I think there's a lot of overlap here. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting because I think culture is always changing, but we've certainly been through a really big culture shift over the last year. And we'll probably have a second one for many of us as our current way of doing business and working transitions to another one. So, what things do we want to keep that we've had? So I put that I don't want the butt in seat mentality. We definitely had a lot of that before. And I think the flexibility that's come, from this, from the last year has been really huge for me and something I really liked. And so, I'd like to be able to keep that. So I guess I could have put that on the other side, flexibility. But also, interest in colleagues, finding those ways to connect, things like that, I think are keys.
I wrote the post-it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those notes as well. David, what's standing out as you're looking at this?
Well, I'm going to echo what Jamie just said, and that there's a lot of overlap between what everybody posted. And I love the amount of stuff we got posted since we have a relatively small group here today. So kudos to everybody. But I think that overlap is one of the things. It's one of the reasons I think Monica and I are doing this, in that we see the same things over and over again at different companies, and a lot of people will think, oh, that this is my organization, we're like this, it's such a pain, and people are like this or that or whatever, and it really, that's everywhere. Because all organizations, it's all run by people, and people are have more in common than they have differences. So it does not surprise me to see people from 6-7 different organizations here on the call writing the same thing about what they want to see and what they don't want to see.
And to build on that, the curiosity macro lens I would love for all of us to note is, well, one, wow, we all feel the same way. Oh, that's cool. And two, wait, but we're feeling the same way, but why is this still hard? Is probably the macro question too. And I want us to be comfortable seeing that question too, not as a bad thing, but as a curiosity observation, of a reminder that if you feel that, geez, like I feel like these emails were so crystal clear, I shared this many times that we're doing this for this reason, and it's not going through. I want to share this because I want to give them ownership. I'm trying to give them feeling empowered, but it's coming across somehow ill-informed decision-making, or it's making them feel defensive. I'm not really sure. as much as a reminder that this is many of us what we feel, the fact that it's hard to do is part of why I hope you feel and forgive yourself to realize that it's not going to be solvable or addressable in one time. So time is part of the patience, practice is part of the time. And this is the very reason why you even spending time, even just taking an extra few minutes during this time, asking these questions again of like, okay, let me just bare minimum. What do I actually want and what do I not want? Is actually helping you, even though it feels like I'm already thinking about it. Because as simple as it might sound, it is actually the hardest thing. The most important things are the hardest thing because we're trying to figure out how it makes sense for all of us. And so I want to plant those two, and thank you again, as David said, very much for sharing all of these. And I want to circle back on the past two sessions as we think about the core elements for today. One, our first session, we spoke all about, well, before we kind of get a little upset about our colleagues who's like, hey, this is not my problem. That's not for me. I know everything about the customer. That's not mine. They will come like, oh, I guess they'll come because once we build. If we're not seeing the response, how do we pause to see with an empathy and of like, when somebody says this is what's in for me and this is not my thing, I wonder why they feel that way. I wonder why they're saying that this is not my problem. Because from your lens, like as Jamie's mapping this out, it's like very clear. I'm like, this is going to help your department. I'm trying to help you. So it's being curious, and that's going to, again, take courage. And as a result, number two, when we communicate, we shared about how, while we might, again, and Jamie, I'm going to just share again because I loved your reminder again of how, wow, it was a reminder that even though I've been thinking a lot about this, it's new for them. They just haven't thought about it. And so how do we intentionally communicate? Because I know we all don't want to be spams at any context of any person in any way, internally as well. And so how do we do this strategically, right? We spoke about last session, who, how, the when all matters. And we kept the culture theme last because as you're probably already reflecting and noticing, none of this is buildable unless we think holistically with those building blocks that we built. And so for this part of the theme, the key frameworks that I want us to constantly be asking ourselves is why now, and what's next? David, why is trust important in this process?
That's a good and it's a big question, because when I hear the word trust in this context, I think about a lot of different things. And there's the trust that comes from like the overall process. Like, is this whole thing just creating more work for me? That's you have to trust that there's something beneficial in it for you. And then there's also the trust in terms of the people. If I participate in this and I do what you want me to do, which is share and see things that I'm looking at and figure out what we can do about them, I won't be, shot down. I won't be criticized. There's that kind of trust. And then as you kind of go down, we kind of went to the macro trust and the people trust. And then there's like what I might call the tactical trust, which is in the data. I'm looking at something. Can I actually believe what I'm looking at? Which, all of these things kind of take time because the proof is in the pudding. You have to do it and people have to go through the process and then see, okay, I can trust at this level. When we talk about trust is really broad. And you've got to kind of hit on all if any one of those things is missing, you don't trust in one of those things, you're not going to be as successful as you can and should be.
And I want to emphasize, equally as important as we think about culture is connected to the last point David said, which is the actual tangible data. And this is where the strategy of communication is going to be key. How are we communicating so that we're probably answering already some of the questions coming up? Like, oh, you might be wondering, where is this data coming from? Great question. We are so glad you asked. Question number one right here. And seeing as a trusted ally. Because the moment that I feel like, wait, David, you're saying that I trust you, David, as a person, but when you say to trust me the data, but how do I know? And like, I start writing all these long emails, David's going to be like, oh my gosh, Monica sent me another long email, right? Now we're just creating a ripple effect that was unnecessary. So again, trust as a foundation means a lot. And so I want you to continue to be curious, how am I communicating that trust in the way I do? Well, starts with one area, probably heard of the term a lot this year in particular, which is psychological safety. And as David has already alluded, we feeling safe also means not just in the data, the language, it's everything. And so that means that if I'm asking for help from David as a colleague, like, oh, I'm feeling safe to know that me sending an email to ask this question that I feel I know for an expert like David to come across like, oh, Monica's asking this stupid question. Maybe he might think about it, but he's not going to say it, and he's going to make me feel safe to bring it up. So I feel safe to ask him all the questions because I know the feedback loop I get back is I get an answer, David responds to me, and it feels safe to know that even though I feel stuck, I know that I have somebody that can ask for help, whether it's the data source, the technical usage, or the aspect of, wait, after I do this, what am I supposed to do next? Because as some of you pointed out, the workflow and the decision-making is directly impacted as well. David.
It's that last piece of it really, resonated with me also, because we talk about, everything. We talked a lot about the trust. I ask a question, I get a response back. I say something about that. We have a dialogue, and there's trust in that. And then we get to the part at the end about what do we do about that. And kind of the context I had for the back and forth conversation might be around the data. It might be somebody else's department. It might be like people in IT, using that broadly, who manage the system, showing me that, yeah, that data is actually right. But ultimately, if I'm asking the question, probably it's because I've got some sort of vested interest or control over what we do next. And so that part about the action that happens from all this analytics, that's where things start to get really scary, because you can have all these theoretical conversations, but eventually the rubber meets the road and we all say, all right, we're going to change this. We change the way we market, we add a new product, we change the price point, whatever it is, and that represents risk. And that, we have to get people to buy in, and nobody wants to be the one that made a change that didn't work out, or worse yet, produced the exact opposite outcome. So change is scary, change is risky. And so when we talk about like that psychological safety, that's where a lot of this comes in, and where, we have to, everybody in the organization that contributed to that decision kind of has to be on the same page, and trust in the fact that we collectively made the right decision to do this, so that, afterwards we can all look and say, all right, what actually happened? And, if it worked out great, how do we make it better? If it didn't quite work out, all right, what do we change going forward from here? And that's, that's where that scary part is the part that I think a lot of people will struggle with,
And to build on that, this is the reason why I love this visual, because the cycle happens for our fear too. So just like that, all the things you shared that what you don't want to see in your culture, imagine how you also felt, going back to even the joke about the last time I didn't like that Star Wars movie, maybe I'm not going to be excited to see when the next one comes out. Like even that joking reference, it's just a human reminder of how just our brain tends to process. Either is it fear-led or safety-led? And knowing that it's a cycle, there's an opportunity of us designing a flow to change that by building the implements. Jeff, I saw your hand up, please.
What is common knowledge effect?
The common knowledge effect is, and see curiously how it has in this quotation, because it's probably not true, but it comes a common knowledge that, oh, you know what the consequence is when you send that email to David, we're not going to get the result. Oh, and I don't want to bring it up because the common knowledge is that when we bring it up to David, he's not going to respond. So why are we bringing it up in the first place? I'll just figure out on my own. And then it becomes a false narrative that we repeat ourselves. That becomes
some historical experience that gives you common knowledge that could send you back into the loop. Okay.
Would that also have something to do with the idea that we use acronyms and other sort of business lingo, and everyone expects everyone else to know them. And so you feel, fear of asking for clarification, just like Jeff did. What does this mean, right? I don't know what this means. You need to be in a safe place to ask that. Otherwise you're just gonna, totally. Yeah, I'm on board. And you have no idea what's going on, right? And it excludes you.
That's why it took me so long to ask that question, because it was a danger area.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you feeling safe to ask it, Jeff. Thank you very much. This is a real-time example. As Jamie, you have highlighted, the reason why this is part of our culture conversation is that, yes, from an objective point of view, it sounds like, wait, we're just talking about a jargon and maybe some people know it, some people not, but it's the behavior, right? As Jeff said, it leads us to, in those key conversation, and it could be that actually, maybe me raising that hand and being comfortable to get that clarity means that I'm going to actually do my workflow then better because now I know how that embeds, or I can then clarify because Jeff might be like, oh, actually, now that we know that what that meant on the slide, can I share a suggestion? Because I think there's a better phrase that we can use. And now we're going to, oh, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, let's go edit this. This is not correct. But that's where it's part of the safety, because if not, then none of these behaviors come to even surface. So thank you, Jeff, for sharing that. I hope I answered.
Yeah, along that line, your previous slide, when Dave was
Yes.
talking about trust, we have data in two areas. It comes from people and it comes from sources, devices. And you can either trust the person delivering the message about the data, or you can trust where the data is coming from, because ultimately all data comes from people. Somebody may program a sensor, somebody may turn a machine on. Often we abstract the human interface with the data if it comes from a piece of hardware, for example. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to find out, is the insight of the data trustworthy? And that could be mounds and mounds of data coming in from some source, or it could be in a dialogue with a person like today. And this trust that we've always found and inspected is earned from experience, that the last time we inspected that conversation, we got this result, or the last time we really drilled down on the data, we got this result. So the next time we want to do a business decision and an insight, we can leap over the concern because the trust is there. So that's just what I was thinking when Dave was talking about trust in people. Every time I ask, where did this originate? And sometimes it takes some work, because you can't take the mound of data for face value just because it's a lot and it's historical.
So I'm smiling, Jeff, because dun, 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 we are talking about that on bullet point 2. And that is exactly part of the reason why that component, Jeff, that you pointed out is a key segment, as you've observed and highlighted, to bring up in culture. I love these two visuals because what it reminds me is that, Jeff, even in your example of how we earned, what this visual reminds us is that we do that in many ways. Simple thing of just even how a meeting might be set up, how the tone is set, what kind of language is used, but also in the calendar invites, and how we might have sent the email, how the document might have looked. Something simple as that. Is this an open document where everyone contributes, or is there a set agenda that I feel like only the boss gets to set? Or am I invited and actually get to participate versus like I'm on webinar and like, why am I even here? So there's all these different ways that influence how we feel, which also means how we can give the feedback and get that feedback loop of trust that we feel we can earn and build versus not. Because with each action, there's an effect that we feel of like, ding, I got the trust, or like, I'm not sure if I build getting that trust. And that builds the feedback loop. And I know, David, you have a ton of stories that you probably want to share back as well.
Oh, boy, oh, good, I'm not on mute this time. There's probably more than we have enough time to go into here today. But I mean, this happens on both, and I'll use Jeff's example, for people and data, but I'm going to use it in a slightly different context. When we deal with data with a lot of different groups and a lot of different companies, and you can sometimes get into it with the people. So citing one job we work on, where the data is pretty solid and everybody's got high confidence in the data. But what I've noticed is that the people, aren't always very trusting of each other. So you've taken, you've got this and you visualized it this way. Why that way? This doesn't make sense. Let's change it to this. Or I put it that way because you said you wanted it, and then they get into this unproductive feedback loop. And that's something to be, to watch out for. It's more of the negative sense, but it could be a positive aspect of that as well, where I've been in customer conversations, and it actually started out with bad, not bad data, but incomplete data. We were showing something to somebody, and they were looking at the data, and they said something's not right about this. And as it turns out, if we flash forward, many months actually in the future, they found out it's because in their source systems they weren't pulling data out, but they thought they were. But the conversation between the people was always very productive. It wasn't like you made a mistake about this or you didn't think about this. It was like, this isn't seem right to me. What do we do? And then tracing back and finding everything. So, that's like the two sides of the same coin. You get into those conversations, but the examples are virtually endless, and they go across every industry. Nobody is immune from that cycle.
Absolutely. And this is why I'm so happy whoever put the post-it on spin the personal interpretation of the data. You just never know. And this is the reason why the third pillar that we emphasize is, what does growth mean? And finding clarity. Wait, why should we talk about growth and culture? Well, because culture is a growing, living thing. It's a breathing thing. It's not just a statement that you put on a company website. We all know that, right? That's why we're here. That doesn't seem to work very well. I think we all learned from COVID, especially for those who might have tricked themselves into it. It's a growing thing. And so growth and culture is intertwined, because you will see visible growth when your culture is built with clarity, to know that where is it growing? Where are we heading? Why do we care about growing? And are we on the same boat? And so part of that was why seeing the keywords, such as where I love some of you brought up, is like having ownership, knowing that, okay, Jamie, Jeff, Troy, like everyone who's here, if we're a team, it's not like, I'm competing with like so-and-so. It's like, no, me, helping answer somebody's email and like being available is like supporting, because we're all growing together, but I have ownership in helping support. David doesn't have to wait for my email to feel like they can support another person. I don't have to wait. We can proactively, because we know the North Star based on when the foundation is. David?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is very, very important. We talk about growth. I mean, as somebody that manages, other people, growth comes in two forms. And any of your stakeholders in these types of data projects probably have a very similar mentality. And there's the growth of the organization and the growth of the people. Ideally, they reinforce each other. I tend to think about the people first, because if the people are growing, then in my thinking, the organization will naturally benefit and grow from that. But you can look at those as, the kind of the metrics. What do the people say about their personal growth? And then does it show up in our numbers? Do we, the company's numbers, do we have more customers? Do we sell more? Are we more profitable? Whatever it is. That's easier to have KPIs about that than about people. But I kind of take that view on growth, and actually I use it, for as a selling point. Everybody's interested in personal growth, but most people are anyway. Saying that, this is something that will help you grow in your current job, and also, to be frank, in whatever your next job is, because very few people spend an entire career at one place these days. We talk about building a data culture. Data's the way of the world. Everybody's doing it now. Maybe you've been in this job for 10 years and you have gotten away without having to be very data driven. But if you're going to move somewhere else, odds are you're going to have to, you're going to walk into that job and they're going to expect it. I kind of couch things that way as a way to get buy-in. But, growth comes in many forms, and ultimately it also helps make your job easier. Right. Organizational growth and your growth.
And to build on this is the very reason why for today's conversation, these three keywords, how we think about psychological safety, feedback loop, and know that growth is connected to ownership, shared ownership, that we have stake in the game, permits everyone to know that this is not just one person, not just all of your work, but something that we share and grow and do together. And so I hope that as you continue to design, whether it's the culture aspect or think about how I design the workflow or communication, taking a pause to see, how is this connected to all of this? So that way we're actually co-creating and it's not one side conversation. Because that's where the intention, the small moments, and ownership matters. So to build on that, I do want to get a chance to do at least one quick breakout session. If we can take a moment to pause and curious to hear your thoughts. If you can first share your comments and reflections in the Jamboard. And with that, I want to give us at least a few minutes to jump into our breakout rooms. So with that, I believe we are all back here in the main room. How did the breakout session go?
Ours was good. Yep.
I'm curious,
Great.
what are some dots and thoughts that you want to bring to surface to the main room?
I left the bomb on the table Dave's going to handle.
Yes, that was a whole other session worth of content, right? Exactly, about people that try to buy in so much that they want to do the work when they don't have time to do the work, which is which is another topic. But I think we had a good conversation about. We did spend a lot of it talking about buy-in. And it was interesting because the three people that were in the room with me hadn't been in our first session, Monica, where we actually talked a lot about that. So we're going to share some of that stuff with them as well. So.
And building on that, I'm going to piggyback on a lot of what we spoke, Brad, Troy, and Kelly, where, Brad, I'm going to circle back on your wonderful reminder that what your boss shared about is how much sometimes when we don't know, we make up our own stories. And so the phrase Brad shared was like lacking information, people make up their own stories, and how that creates confusion, mistrust, and realizing that, wait, are you saying that we're using this technology because I'm not good at my job? Was that what you're trying to say? When it's like, wait, I thought this was supposed to be an exciting thing. And so how do we look out for those cues? How do we make sure when it happens, the culture feels safe so that person brings up to get clarification? And Kelly reminded of just like, some people, how do we communicate in a way that some people don't feel wasted time, but enough so that they feel supported? And so I hope that going back to an hour ago, I have accomplished my mission, while short it is, to leave you with more questions, more insight. And again, an hour is never enough, but hopefully with more reminder that, hey, you got this. We're here to support, and you have some toolkits to circle back. But how do we feel? We've got some action steps to work on and feel empowered, encouraged, I hope. Jamie, I'm curious what's coming up for you.
Yeah, I mean, we had really great chat in the breakout a little bit about the idea of delegating that came up, about creating the culture. And my particular challenge is, how do you delegate when they're not on your team, because dynamics and teams have shifted a lot over the last year. So if you're not managing them and you don't have that authority, how do you get them bought in, and how do you help hold people accountable and do kind of those things and form a team for this purpose?
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't solve it, but that's,
Right.
the challenge we're working on in that, 6 minutes or whatever.
Well, starting helps. Starting
Yes.
is where we get. Ashish, if I can have your final check-in too.
Yeah, we have a lot of things on our roadmap for this year and for early next year. So this has really helped because we're trying to make a push to increase accountability, but also faith in our data. So all of this knowledge, the collective knowledge, is really helpful.
I'm glad to hear. And I want to be mindful of time. So first, thank you all so much. As David mentioned, we will follow up. We will write the blog later so that you have a written reference too, but in the time being, you'll have access to the Jamboard. We did put together a beautiful kind of a summary deck, so that way you have a reference, but you have our contacts. Thank you very much. Let us know how we can help. And David, any final words?
We are at 4:01, so I'll keep it very brief. Thank you all for attending. We hope you got something very good out of it. And like Monica said, you know how to reach us. So if there are any questions afterwards, feel free. We're happy to talk about culture and data analytics.
And so look forward to the culture and data analytics you continue to build, and have a wonderful May.